So this story is actually pretty crazy here. So you guys all know Cenk Uygur. He's the founder of TYT, and he ran for California 25. He didn't do so well. I think he's at like 7% or something like that. But so what? An interesting development that happened was basically there was this whole thing about a union TYT members. Or sorry, TYT employees trying to unionize, but apparently Cenk Uygur basically put them down. Now, this was really weird because this happened right during the Christie Smith election. And so the minute that the TYT union people went out to basically call out Cenk Uygur, Christie Smith was already jumping on it. It was almost like it was coordinated. It was like perfectly aligned, like right next to each other. And so I was like, what? What exactly is going on here? So something really weird. So there's this piece here from In These Times. It has a lot of details. All right, this is actually posted March 5th, so this is a while ago. But I want to do a bit of a deep dive on this to try to explain this whole situation and give my take on it, which is going to be very nuanced, by the way. So make sure to, buckle in here. This article is titled "The Young Turks Union Fight Gets Nastier with Charges of Retaliatory Firing, Withholding Raises." Now, this is a long article. It's not a long article, actually. But I want to read as much of this to you as I can. So I'm going to sound a little bit like an audiobook, but I really want to read this to you guys. So it says, a contentious union campaign by the staff of the Progressive News Network, TYT, is growing even more combative. Today, the union filed two separate unfair labor practice charges, alleging that the company and its CEO, the popular liberal media figure Cenk Uygur, withheld wage increases and bonuses from employees as a result of the union drive, and that they fired an employee as retaliation for union activity, charges that Uygur denies. On February 12th, about 15 TYT employees announced their intention to unionize with IATSE. They expected to gain voluntary recognition from their famously liberal employer through a simple check of union cards, but were spurned. The company insisted on holding a secret ballot election at work in order to recognize the union, a tactic typically considered to be anti-union. Uygur disputed this, telling In These Times that, quote, voluntary recognition means any recognition process outside of an NLRB election, but card check is generally understood to be what unions mean by voluntary recognition. So just to stop there really quickly to explain what some of the details of this. So IATSE is, I guess, like it's actors union or something like that, or performers union. Now, what's interesting about the IATSE, they actually endorsed Christie Smith in the race against Cenk Uygur, and then they also had endorsed Hillary Clinton. So that tells you what kind of a group this is. So that's a bad sign as to why it is that they're in this sort of thing where they're going inside from inside to try to take Cenk down. It's not a good sign at all, and it's sort of a sign of something fishy going on. So that's IATSE. That's the union that they were trying to unionize. This is 15 employees, okay? And then when it comes to voluntary recognition, it's supposed to be, I guess the way that it works is if there's like a card check of just 50% of union members plus one saying that they want a union, boom, all right, you have a union. That's what it is. So that's what Bernie Sanders proposes to have as law. He wants to have the card check rule, whereas what a lot of companies will try to do is they'll hold these like secret ballot elections so that they'll put it at a later date so that they can basically convince and blackmail basically employees who want to form a union to vote against the union. So that's what's going on here. So he should do a card check. Definitely should do a card check. There's no excuse for that one. It says, in a tense staff meeting held the same day, Uygur urged staffers not to unionize, saying a union would be unsustainable given TYT's perilous financial position. Uygur's position on the union has been widely criticized as hypocritical, coming from a man who made his name as a champion of progressive causes. TYT bills itself as the largest online news show in the world, with more than 200 million views per month. Uygur, who at the time was running for California 25, suggested that the union was politically motivated since IATSE was endorsing one of his opponents in the race. On Tuesday, Uygur lost the race, coming in fourth with about 5% of the vote. An employee of TYT involved in the union effort, who asked to remain anonymous out of fear of retaliation, said that the workers' annual discretionary raises, which represent a significant amount of money in a workplace where pay is already low, were scheduled to go into effect at the same time the union drive was announced. Shortly afterwards, according to the worker, employees involved in the union drive were told they were going to have to delay our raises and bonuses until the union stuff got sorted out. The worker said that employees who were not in the proposed collective bargaining unit did get their raises. One unfair labor practice charge filed at the NLRB by IATSE today says that TYT is guilty of, quote, withholding predetermined wage increases and bonuses in response to a union's demand for voluntary recognition. Uygur said that the company was simply maintaining the status quo while the union drive was active. Frankly, we can't win because we all know that if we gave the raises, IATSE would be accusing us of bribing employees not to support the union. If IATSE doesn't object to TYT giving the raises, we would be more than happy to do so. The employee fired today was Ja'Cory Palmer, a technical director who occasionally appeared on the show as well. Palmer said that he was the employee who was, quote, reprimanded by Uygur for smiling during the meeting when the union was first announced, an incident reported by HuffPost. Quote, his first day back acting as head of the company, after his congressional campaign ended, he fired me with no clear explanation. I have no doubt that this was in connection to my coworkers and I organizing for a voice at work. It was meant not only to remove a perceived troublemaker, but also as a warning shot to my coworkers. Without a doubt, this was retaliatory. Throughout my time at TYT, I had made myself known as someone unafraid to vocalize injustices, especially in cases for fair treatment for my coworkers, he added. I found management very abrasive each time I tried to voice my concerns over coworkers. My coworkers had brought to my attention. Each time I hoped their progressive politics would govern their response, and each time I was wrong. Uygur said that the company had no knowledge regarding the employees' support for the union or the lack thereof, and that the firing was justified. TYT's practice is to refrain from sharing details regarding personal matters. However, since IATSE has accused us of wrongdoing, we will respond in this case. There was an employee fired this week for violating the company's anti-harassment policy. TYT's ongoing engagement with this employee in disciplinary warnings regarding his misconduct date back several months, predating any communications from the union. Recently, we received several new complaints regarding the employee's behavior from that former employee's colleagues, and complaints were fully investigated and the company took the appropriate action. In response, Palmer said all the incidents that they were referring to are incidents of me speaking up for my coworkers about injustice in the workplace. The uproar over the raises and the dismissals only added to the level of dissatisfaction inside of TYT. Employees are also upset that the company is trying to reduce the size of the bargaining unit. Uygur said that the company's request was reasonable and customary, but the TYT worker calls the idea of taking anyone out of the proposed union a no-go for us. The events of this week have only strengthened the resolve of the employees to win a union. Quote, if the company is going to punish us, the TYT worker said, that just underscores why it is important for us to organize. So there's a lot to take in there. Basically, he fired this guy who was smiling about getting a union, and he's alleging it's retaliatory. Cenk says no, this predates the whole union stuff. And so that's something that kind of needs to be looked at, and that is definitely something that could be proven from documentation, and we can sort of get the details on that. But basically, he didn't want to do a card check, which he should have done a card check. But here's where the nuance sort of comes in, right? So here's the thing for me, right? So TYT is not a big business, right? TYT is not a big business, okay? Its revenue is not anything massive, and then they are a pretty small business. And so for me, union jobs typically, considering the realm that they're in, relatively speaking, like good union paying jobs, like steel workers, stuff like that, like they make pretty good money relative to what they do, right? So, especially with the healthcare, they usually get good healthcare, which is usually a better trade-off for a raise because healthcare costs so much money right now that it's like you'd rather get healthcare because you're saving so much money by getting healthcare, especially if you're like a steel worker or something like that, obviously, because you're working with your hands. And so, you really have to be pretty well established, and so I'm pretty sure they probably don't have the funds to be able to do that. I really don't think they do. Which is unfortunate, and I think that if that is the case, if they really financially can't do it, then I understand that, and that's why having the union would be tough. So, is he a hypocrite there if the business model cannot support having a unionized, where they're, having good, really great pay and, healthcare and all that stuff? I don't really think so. I don't think so. Now, if he can do it, then yeah, that is kind of hypocritical for sure. And it should be, doing card checks for sure. Like, a card check if they want to start a union. But to me, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Okay. So if he's a hypocrite or not, it really doesn't matter to me because this is not the bigger picture. You have to think about the bigger picture. Okay. Let's say he's a hypocrite here. it doesn't really make any difference. Like, so the response a lot of people would have to this is some people are going to cancel, right? They're going to want to end it, Um, I think that canceling a show that advocates for progressive change, like unions, is a dumb idea because 15 workers at TYT couldn't get a union, most likely because they don't have the finances to do so. Let's even say they had the finances to do so. That's stupid, okay? And let's say they barely had the finances to do so. It's still a bad idea because it really doesn't matter about those 15 employees at the end of the day when we're talking about the bigger picture, because we're talking about getting card check union policy as like statutory law, like an actual law that's passed. So let's say, they fight for that law, right? And then they're not doing that right now, but then they help get the law passed. Does that then really matter? I don't think so. I really don't. And so you got to look at it in the bigger picture either way. So I think it's a bad idea to just cancel based on that. Now, if he's able to financially do it, is he a hypocrite? Yes, he is. But again, I don't think that it's a good idea to cancel because having a sort of big mainstream media, independent media outlet, is a big help to progressive causes. And so I think you're just sort of miniature zooming in and you're focusing on just eating your own at that point. And so the right wing never does this, right? The right wing doesn't eat their own. That's not what they do. And so you have to understand, you have to level. Neither do the corporate Democrats, by the way, although they do sometimes, but pretty rarely, though, I would say. Fairly rarely. I mean, you see Joe Biden right now. But is he possibly a hypocrite? Yeah, he could be a hypocrite, totally, for sure. He could be 100%. And the biggest thing I want to say is, you got to come on air and do a segment on this, Cenk. Like, somebody, Cenk, Anna, somebody's got to talk about this because you can't just let people speculate. This is actually the dumbest thing I've seen that they haven't come out to talk about this. You have to come out and address this. People have questions. People have concerns. You have to let us know what is going on. At least talk about it. You can't just like slide it under the rug, pretend it didn't happen. This is a big deal. People want to know what's going on. Don't you want to give us your side of the story? Don't you want to clear up things that you think are false or maybe misleading? And so that's why I don't understand why they haven't already come out yet. It's weird to me that they haven't done that. But there may even be extra details that we don't have from this. But the most important thing I think you should take from this is, really, honestly, I don't really care. Honestly, I really don't. Because again, I see the bigger picture of this. So it's like, for me, unionizing is important at businesses like McDonald's and just Walmart and these big businesses that can actually, have the finances to sort of do that kind of a thing. Whereas TYT, you're like going for this little small business, and it's like you're dying on this hill for this small business when really you're sort of missing the trees, like you're missing the target. You know what I mean? You're missing the target is what you're doing. And so to me, I really don't care. It really doesn't matter to me. Now, the one thing is optics is a big thing for everything, right? So one thing you're going to say is, dude, this is a bad look for them. They're going to use this against them. You might be right. And I hope that was something that went into Cenk Uygur's calculations when he did this. Because, yeah, you're probably right. This probably will be used against him. It actually already has been used against him. But the fashion it's been used against him is actually really shady. And that Christy Smith was on this, like, literally the second that IATSE came out about this, TYT Union came out about this, Christy Smith jumped on it, like literally a second. So it was almost like it was coordinated. But even if the guy is a hypocrite, it doesn't matter. You got to think big picture here. Focusing on a small business when we're talking about real structural change is dumb, okay? Even if you think that they should have let them unionize, which is a totally legit opinion, right? I really don't care what your opinion is. But I mean, you can have sort of any opinion. I just think the opinion that would be done would be canceling because the influence that they have is overwhelmingly good. And just because they don't unionize, even if they're hypocrites, it's still a net positive to have their help by a long shot. So it's just a dumb situation to do that, especially when their finances are not that great, considering they're a small business and, going off of YouTube views and memberships and stuff like that. They're not going off of they don't have extremely high paying advertisers like CNN and stuff. Like, you can't compare TYT to flipping CNN and MSNBC or any other company. Those are the companies we're going after. And if your focus is on TYT, you've lost the target, bro. You've completely lost it. And so you're gonna be like, oh, dude, yeah, but he's a hypocrite. So what? So what, man? So what? I really couldn't care less because I actually have a serious focus and have a look at the bigger picture and what's actually important and serious. And so when you do this little mini stuff, it's like, bro, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So, I don't know what's going to happen again. I would advise TYT talk about this. Tell us what's going on. Don't just swipe this under the rug, pretend like it doesn't exist, because it does exist. So we want to know what's going on here. But it's definitely probably not a good look for them. I would say it's definitely not a good look for them, actually. They could be hypocrites for sure, assuming there's not some details that we're missing. But at the end of the day, again, you got to make sure, focus on the big goal, okay? Don't get sidetracked by some side quest, okay? Some mini quest that's completely a waste of time. We've got serious work to do here. We're not here worried about 15 employees unionizing at TYT when we're talking about structural change at all the big corporations in the United States, bring workplace democracy, et cetera, et cetera. And that's another thing, too, with the whole workplace democracy thing. Cenk isn't big on that kind of stuff. So, that's a whole other thing. But don't get stuck in the side quest. Focus on the real mission and the end goal, okay? Don't get stuck on chocobo racing. We got to beat Sephiroth.